Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Martial Variety channel. It is Jake here, back with a solo video, and I'm going to do something a little bit different today. As you know, I did mention in the intro video that I wanted to do things other than makeup, for example, books and video games, so I thought I'd bring you my first book video today, and it's just going to be a book haul of all the books I've bought myself in the last, half a year or so, ones I had for Christmas as well. And I'm not going to describe the books in detail here. I'll do a separate video for that if you guys want to see it. All I'm going to do is show you the book, little quick synopsis, and tell you whether I read it or not and what I rated it. So I hope you guys enjoy this. So we're going to start with the books I bought first of all. So the first one I bought, this is in no particular order because I can't exactly remember the exact time I bought these, but the first one was Animal Farm by George Orwell. So this is a classic, and I've been wanting to get into classics a lot more because I find a lot of the time they're quite a struggle to read because of the way they're written, but I heard that this George Orwell books were an easy way to get into it, and I actually did really enjoy this one. I did read this and I gave this one 3.5 stars. If you guys want to see a second video where I review all the books, then I'll describe it a bit more in there. But I do recommend this. It is quite short, it's only like 90, 100 pages, something like that. And it is very, very interesting. So the next book, continuing on the Orwell theme, is 1984. So this is a classic, as it were. This is extremely popular. It's been made into a film. Loads of people study this in school, that kind of thing. But I've never read it before, and I actually thought this was awesome. It's one of the first dystopians that was ever written. And I thought this was really, really interesting. As you can see, there's a lot of tabs in here. So very quickly, a little side note. When I read my books, I use different coloured tabs. I don't have a colouring system or anything. It's not like red for funny, that kind of thing. No, I just pick two colours and I tab all the different quotes in the different parts of the book that I find like strikes me, or I'm just like, oh my god, that's beautiful. And then I use one other colour and I face it upwards to note my favourite chapter, and that's what I always do. So as you can see, there was quite a lot here because I thought it was very, very interesting the way that George Orwell wrote this. But there was one glaring flaw with it, which is why I only gave it 4 stars, but I'll discuss that more in the second video if you want to see it. So the next is a very exciting one. So this is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Sounds bizarre by the title, but it's couldn't be more fitting, really. This is an absolutely amazing book. One of the best books I've ever read. Absolutely incredible. It is 4.5 stars I gave this. Maybe even 5 stars. Thinking back on it, I loved it that much. You can see I tabbed a lot of things in here. This had stunning writing. I'll go more into that in the second video, but highly recommend this. This discusses mental illness, and it gives you some very, very interesting, very quirky characters to follow, and I couldn't highly recommend it enough, really. So the next is a book I read on my iPad a year and a half ago, and now it's been made into a film and it's extremely popular, and that is Call Me By Your Name by Andre Ackerman. And oh yes, the last book was by Gail Honeyman, by the way. And I decided to buy this in a real copy because I loved it that much. I thought the book was fantastic. Bit of a warning for smut. There is some smut in this, so if you're not into smutty books, especially smutty gay books, I wouldn't recommend. But everybody else, definitely go for it. I thought this was really interesting. The writing style was really, really interesting. Of course, I'll go into that a bit more at a later date, but it's just about a 17-year-old boy falling in love with someone a little bit older than him over a summer one year. And obviously there's a bit more to it than that, but yeah, it's awesome. And I can't wait to reread it again to tab up loads of the parts that I thought were beautiful, because I did it quite a lot on my iPad. So next is something I forgot to take the sticker off. Oh, mortified. Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. So this has been made into a really popular film now, which I also haven't seen because I wanted to read the book first. I've heard that this is awesome. It has lots of 80s references. They go into a video game world. It's based on that kind of thing. And I do think this sounds really interesting. I haven't read this one. Call Me By Your Name, by the way, got a 5 stars. I loved it. So I'm excited to read this one. I wouldn't say it's next on my to-be-read list, but it's definitely there. So next I got 2 hardback books that I bought, and I don't do that very often because they are so expensive. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous how much they charge for them. I do prefer reading them, to be honest. Whilst they do cramp my hands out, they are so much nicer to look at and so much nicer to hold. So that is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Now here's something I highly recommend. I do love this author because The Fault in Our Stars is one of his other books, even though a lot of people do have issues with it, which I can totally agree with, I can understand. Still one of my favourite books of all time, one of the things that got me back into reading after I fell out of love with it in school, got back into it again in college, and I did think this was fantastic. I read this one, this was a 4.5 stars for me. I did have a little bit of an issue with it, which we'll discuss at a later date, of course, if you guys want to see that, but I did tab a lot. There is amazing mental health representation information in here. And when I read it, I was only on the cusp of my own issues. So I feel like if I reread it now, it'd probably hit me even harder because a lot of anxiety, OCD, that kind of thing is discussed in here. And because the author himself has those issues, it's like, it hits you so hard, like it's knife to the heart, but it's amazing. Highly recommend. The next is, lost all my bookmarks and I'm going to show you them as well. Next is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. So this is one I heard a lot about on BookTube, because of course I do watch a lot of BookTubers, and their videos are just so entertaining, and I love it when they go on long, like half an hour long videos, and they just talk about all these different books. It's just so fascinating to me, and that's the reason why I end up loving all the books that I like at the moment, because I only read what's highly recommended to me, and I'm very much on an LGBT kick. I love reading books about gay characters. I wish there was more from the female perspective. I do want to read some more of that because I am lacking in that regard, I will be honest. But I also want to read some books with some trans representation as well, because I want to, get a bit more educated, because, education is great. So this is a really interesting book, actually. This is set in like the 1800s, and it's about a main character who is bisexual and is falling for his best friend, and they sort of go on a huge adventure. That's all I'll say. But I did really like this. I gave this 4 stars. I didn't think it was as incredible as some people were saying that it was. There was a lot about it that I did love, but I did have one glaring flaw with it, which I will discuss at a later date, of course. But yeah, I thought this one was really good. Do highly recommend. So the next is, I hate the cover I have of this so much. I need to buy this in like the official proper cover. But this is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So I did read this one, and straight away this got 5 stars. This is one of my favourite books ever. One of the best books I've ever read. It took me, the entire 500 pages to come to that conclusion, because this is a slow burn, but God, is it worth it. Like, what a book. So this is about a magic circus, I think that's all I'm going to say, and 2 magicians who are going to duel to the death. That's what it says on the blurb anyway, no spoilers. But absolutely loved this. I've never really read writing so expressive and so beautiful before. It's crazy, and I can't wait to talk about it with you all some more. So the next is a book I read actually on the night of my 22nd birthday. God, I don't want to age that fast. I was sat there and I was like, you know what, I want to read a book, and I read it all night, and I read the entire book in one sitting, and I was there till 7 in the morning on my birthday, and that is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So of course everybody knows what this is. Everybody's seen the film, read the book, one or the other. Of course, tabbed it to death because this hit me hard. This is a profoundly impacting book. It's a wonderful book. I think it's something everybody should read. I do also think this is something they should teach in schools, because it is so important, like the whole peace brutality thing, getting people up on that it's not as equal as people think it is. It's definitely not, of course, not as bad as it used to be, but it's still not great these days, and people need to realise that. But yeah, this was a 5 stars for me. I don't think it was perfect, but I would give it 5 stars. I have no criticisms for it, you know what I mean? Like, it is so, so good. Next is a book I read very recently, actually. This is Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. So I haven't seen Love, Simon yet. I really wanted to read the book first before I watched the film. But I really, really enjoyed this. I love a good fluffy gay romance book. That's like one of my all-time favourite things. And that's probably what I'm going to go and read after this, actually. And we'll discuss that in a little bit. But this is awesome, because anyone who was gay in high school / comprehensive school, wherever country you're from, can relate to the characters in this. It's just so easy to see yourself in their shoes and understand their struggles. Like, it won't necessarily make you feel, but there's definitely some points where you'll be reading and you'll be like, oh my God, yeah, totally, like, that was so me. And that's why I really enjoyed it. I didn't think it was like mind-blowing, like it was only a 4 out of 5 stars for me, but I did really, really enjoy this. And I do want to read some of her other books, especially The Upside of Unrequited. I think that sounds really interesting. So next is a book I'm really excited to read the sequels for. I bought this one on a whim because I thought the premise of it sounded very interesting. And this is Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So this is a really, really interesting book. This is a book that's written in multimedia files. So it's written in like interviews, like clips, stuff from like an AI's perspective. It's really, really interesting. Like, it's a really different way to tell a story. And that was what drew me in. And since I read another book that I forgot to bring with me, The Martian by Andy Weir, loved that. That was a 5 stars. That was amazing. Highly recommend that one if you want to get into some sci-fi. And I think this might get you into sci-fi even more, because this is so fast-paced, and this was a 5 stars for me straight away. Did have one major issue with it, which I will discuss in the review video, but for now I can say that I loved it, and I really want to read the 2 sequels because it's so, so interesting, and it was really intense. Like, this is something you'll be page turning until the very last second. It's crazy. So that's it for the books that I bought myself, including The Martian, which I just mentioned. So now I'm going to go on to the ones I got for Christmas off my nan and granddad. I requested books off them this year, and I just gave them a list, and they bought me all of them. Some of which I've read, some I haven't. So let's discuss. So firstly is a classic that I read in school, actually, and I've been wanting to reread it ever since, so I could give it a proper rating and tab it up and everything. So that is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I think most people will know this. This is an absolute classic, and when I was in school, I was kind of like, I don't particularly like this, probably because my reading wasn't exactly as a big focal point in my life as it is now. But thinking back on it and all the really awesome messages that are in this, I actually think this is a masterpiece. Brilliant. I'm most likely going to give it 5 stars, but I do remember the beginning, like first 100 pages or so, being really, really slow, so that could knock it down half a star for me. But I'm not sure. It depends on how much I enjoy the characters, because I loved them the first time, so I'm very interested to see what I think the second time. This is a really important book. I'm glad they teach this in schools, because it has a lot of underlying messages about racism in the Deep South, which is so, so important. So next is book I'm a little bit scared to talk about, actually, because this is so highly reviewed, and I didn't necessarily love it, to be honest. And that is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. So this is a really, really interesting book, actually. I love the premise of this. This is written in verse, so it's written in, like, every page is like a poem, and not necessarily a rhyming one, nothing like that. But that's how he decides to tell the story. That's my main issue with the book, is that I think the premise and the discussion is extremely important and is amazing. But I feel like it would have been better done if it was an actual novel, or maybe a short story or something. Like, just make it a short story. I just think it's really interesting. It basically involves a young black guy in America whose brother gets shot by a gang, and he wants to continue the tradition of, you know, getting him back and shooting the guy who shot him. And as he's going down the elevator, he sees a lot of his deceased relatives who've also been killed by gun violence in America. And I won't say no more than that, but it's profoundly impacting, but because of the verse style, I think that's just not my thing, to be honest. I was just kind of I was too busy trying to read through it and not really taking it in, and then I was rereading bits and I was like, So this was a book I'm a bit on and off with. This is a 3-star for me. I do intend to reread it, though, because it was a quick read. I read it in like an hour or two, so... Next is the book I'm going to read next, I think. So that is What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. So Adam Silvera is another author I've been really looking forward to getting into, because he has a lot of LGBT-centered books. And this is one of those, you know, fluffy YA contemporaries. And all of these are YA, by the way. Almost every book I've showed you is YA. But this is so, so interesting. It's just... 2 guys meet at a post office, and they're trying to see if they can hit it off in the future, but things keep getting in their way by the looks of things. And this had really good reviews, so I'm quite excited about that, because I'm okay with the book being like a really fluffy contemporary romance kind of thing. I don't need it to be high stakes to enjoy it, so I am looking forward to that. I do enjoy Becky Albertalli herself, so I think we'll look forward to that one. So next is the most recent book I read, which is A Darker Shade of Magic by Victoria Schwab, V.E. Schwab, whatever you want to call her. So this is part of a fantasy trilogy. I'm trying to get into more fantasy. I don't read it as much. It's only really Harry Potter and, what's that called? The Hunger Games. God, I can't believe I forgot that. They're the only ones I've really read so far, but I read this, and you can see, tabbed it to death, even in a fantasy book, because I was really interested in all the different concepts that were going on in this, so I was tabbing them to make sure I could remember, and I could go back and try and make sure I understood everything. This is really interesting. This is about blood magicians who can travel between different parallel Londons, and each London is different. Some have magic, some don't, some are really awful, and some are beautiful and affluent, and I thought this was fantastic. I loved this, absolutely loved it. 5 stars. Her writing style is beautiful. It's just descriptive enough, but it doesn't go too far, which I think is really interesting, and I loved it. So I highly recommend that one. And to go along with that, I recently bought the sequel because I loved it that much that I decided to buy book 2, which is A Gathering of Shadows. So this is probably the book I'm going to start reading tonight. Either that or What If It's Us, we'll soon see. I don't want to forget about what happens in A Dark Shade of Magic. It has been a few weeks since I've read that, so I think this is what I'm going to read next. It's quite a bit longer than the first one, but reading what happens on the back, obviously I'm not going to spoil anything about that because it spoils what happens in the first one. But I'm very excited to see where it goes, and I have heard the whole series is great. So it's another thing to recommend. So here's another first book in a fantasy series I wanted to get into for a long time, and that's The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. So I've heard lots about this. Loads of people love this. It's a lot of people's favourite series of all time. Very, very excited to try this out. I really love the synopsis of this, that the main character, her first kiss, she'll kill them, her first love will die. It's very, very, very interesting. I don't really know what else is going on in this series because it's very vague the way it's described, but apparently that's the way you need to go into it without really knowing much. So when I do get to read this, I'll let you all know what I think. I'm not going to do wrap-ups, reviews, anything like that particularly often, because I go through periods of reading a lot and then not reading at all. So I think I'll get lots of different reviews together, and then I'll speak like for a minute about each book, something like that. And that's what the next video will be, because I've read a lot of these that I've talked about. So the next is a book I've actually read half of in the past, but I never finished it because I was quite shook by it, actually. Like, I was loving what I was reading, but it hit me with a gut punch, and I was like, oh my god. But I do need to finish it, and that's why I asked for it for Christmas, and that is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. Now, a lot of his books are extremely profoundly impactful, because it's about Afghanistan and the way people have been treated and the wars and everything like that, war-torn countries. And I got about 30-40% into this, and something really awful happened towards the beginning, and I think a lot of people would know what I'm talking about if they've read this, and it shook me to my core. But I am excited to actually read it again, because I remember this being beautiful the way it was written. Like, I will tab this a lot because there were some beautiful, beautiful quotes. And I can remember when now I say it to this day. It's like, it's something like, children are not your colour in books. You don't get to choose what colours you colour them in, or something like that. And I was just like, oh, yes, love that. So yes, I'm very excited to read that one. It'll probably make me cry, I expect, but it does take a lot for a book to make me cry, so we'll soon see. So next is talking about Am Silvera. This is the book I wanted to read from him the most. It's called They Both Die at the End. This sounds very interesting. This is set in a world where you get a phone call one day and then it's your last day. You will die at the end of that day. And it's about two boys who meet each other on that day, and they might fall in love. I don't know if it's a romance or not, but it's definitely about two boys who form a relationship. And I think this sounds very interesting. I'm a bit worried there's going to be insta-lovey, so let's hope that the insta-love is done well, because, you know, this is the last day on Earth after all. We can't blame them. But yeah, I'm very excited to read this one, so I'm definitely going to let you all know what I think of that. So next is two books that I've actually read. Oh god, nice flash on my pit. Sorry about that, guys. So the next one is a book I read recently, and this is one of the best books I've ever read. I knew it would be after seeing the reviews. I was like, oh god, this is definitely going to be a new fave. And that is We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. So you probably heard that title and you were just like, what? What the hell is that? Don't worry, when you actually read where this comes into the book, you'll be like, oh, you'll be so shook, like probably crying, because I didn't cry, but it got me pretty close. As you can see, he tabbed it a hell of a lot, because there were some amazing, amazing, amazing things in here. So the premise of this is the main character's boyfriend, he's a young gay man, committed suicide, and obviously he's struck with grief, like he doesn't know how to deal with it. And the side plot is that he gets abducted by aliens every now and again, and they give him a button, and if he presses the button, then the whole world will be destroyed. But if he doesn't press the button, then the whole world will be fine. And it's all about whether he actually wants to do that, whether he actually wants to live, admitting that you need help. There's amazing grief representation in this. I think it's the best representation of grief I've ever seen in my entire life. Amazing mental health rep as well. I'd love to reread this and talk about you guys with it. By the way, if any of you guys have read any of these books, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion with you on the side, you know, in DM or something, because I don't want to spoil anything in the comments. But this is one I think you need to read. This is fantastic, because the sci-fi is only like a side thing. You haven't really got to worry too much about it, and the representation that's in it is so good that it's highly worth doing. So next is one of the books I was most excited about when I saw this online. So first I'll just show you what it is. So this is the 10th anniversary edition of The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. So a lot of you who know me in person, in real life, will know that this is my favourite book of all time. There has never ever been a book that has topped this. Things like We Are the Ants and some of the others like Night Circus have come close. They're in my top 10, but I think this will always be number one. I don't think any book will ever top this, because this is the only book I've ever read that made me cry right at the end. I really felt the characters in this. I thought this is one of the most genius ways of writing, because this is told from the perspective of Death himself, and he tells the story of the characters, and I just thought that was so inspired, so interesting. And the writing style is very unique. Like, it is something you'll have to get used to, because it's the kind of thing where the author talks to you throughout the book, as well as he's Death himself kind of thing. And this is set in Nazi Germany. It's about a little girl called Liesel who steals books. I'm not going to say much more about that until I talk about this in the review video, but I can't wait to reread this, because it is my favourite book of all time, but I've only ever read it twice when I was younger, so I'm going to read this version. There's some extra content in the back of this. I got this for a really good price. If you can find this for a good price and you love this book or you want to read this book, definitely recommend, because it's a masterpiece. I'm not even going to say any other thing about it, because it's just, you should all know how good that one is. And last but not least is a trilogy I've wanted to read for a long time. So everything I showed you there was young adult YA. Eleanor Oliphant could be classed as adult, I'd say, because some of the themes are quite dark. But this is actually more adult, I would say. This is like YA bridging into adult fantasy. And this is what's called high fantasy. So this is like nothing real about it at all. It's completely right in. You've got to really get into it. So that's the Mistborn Trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. So some of you who know me from uni and things like that, we've talked about this before. You know who you are. I've wanted to get into these for a long time. I think this is a very interesting premise. So the whole point of this is that it's set in a world where the main enemy has already won. The whole world is in ruins. It's a post-apocalyptic, and I love anything post-apocalyptic. A lot of my favourite games have post-apocalyptic in them. And it has a magic system which is based on consuming metals, which I think sounds very interesting. And if you can consume all metals and hold all powers, you're what's called a Mistborn. So I'm very, very interested to see where this goes. This is going to be something I'm going to really need to commit to, though. So I can't see myself reading it yet. I want to get through some of these other like standalones and things first, because I'm usually more for standalones personally. But this was only £19 for all three. And it was in a beautiful box as well. And they're like, you know, £9-10 a piece if you buy them each, because they're so thick. So, yes, I can't really recommend them, of course, because I haven't read them yet. But, yeah. So there's all the books I bought recently. And besides one, obviously, that I mentioned earlier. And all the books I had for Christmas. So, yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. And I'm excited to be doing something different for you all. I've tried putting some lighting by here. I had to take my glasses off because of the anti-glitter. But I really hope you guys enjoyed the setup a little bit more. Hopefully I wasn't too obscure this time. You could see my face a little bit more, I think. And I hope you could see all the books as well. Let me know if you want me to adjust the angles, anything like that. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you thought. And most importantly, let me know in the comments if you want me to make the part 2, where I discuss each book for about a minute in detail, and then discuss what I did like and what I didn't like. I'll do like a bullet point format maybe. And yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you so much for watching. And please like, subscribe, please ring the bell if you want to get notified for any of our future videos. We're going to be making some all the time. We're constantly filming, constantly editing, you know us. We always want to get up as much as we can, and we know you all really enjoy it. And I cannot thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for all the support that you've given us so far. And we hope you can continue to give it to us in the future. So thank you all. I love you so much. I hope you have a fabulous evening. Bye, guys.